This used to be my house." The girl's voice was small, almost lost in the wind. Her coat was soaked through. Her shoes looked like they'd been wet for hours. She stood on the front porch of a mansion that didn't belong to her anymore. If it ever really did, she wasn't crying. That somehow made it worse. Inside, Garrett Langston, tech billionaire and widower, stared at her like he'd seen a ghost. He hadn't had a visitor in weeks, not since the funeral, not since he told the staff to take time off. Indefinitely, the gates stayed locked. The calendar cleared itself. He hadn't spoken out loud in 3 days, and now here stood a stranger, a child soaked to the bone, holding a crumpled grocery bag like it was something precious. Garrett opened the door a little wider, still not sure this wasn't a hallucination. "What did you say?" he asked Dot. She pointed behind him, toward the warm lights inside. "I used to live here, with my mom, before everything." "Where's your mom now?" "She's working. She'll let you walk here alone." "She doesn't know." "She doesn't. Like when I talk about before, she says we're supposed to forget it ever happened." Garrett looked out toward the street. There was no car, no adult, just snowfall, thick and quiet. "What's your name?" "Sadie." "Sadie what?" "Sadie Martinez." The name triggered something faint, something buried, but he couldn't place it. She clutched her bag tighter, glancing at her feet. "I didn't come to beg, I just wanted to see it again." "I'll go." She turned, but before she could step off the porch, he said, "Wait." She stopped, looked back. "You're freezing." "I'm okay." "No, you're not." He hesitated, then said it quietly. "Come inside, just for a few minutes. You don't have to talk, just warm up." She stared at him like she wasn't sure if he meant it. Then she nodded, and stepped inside. The warmth of the foyer made her flinch a little. Her fingers curled tighter around the bag. She glanced around like the house was a dream she'd once had and barely remembered. Garrett handed her a wool blanket from the couch. She didn't say thank you. She just took it and wrapped herself up, carefully, like it might fall apart. He led her into the living room. She sat on the edge of the leather sofa, shoes still wet, body still tense. "What's in the bag?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Drawings. My books. A puppet I made." He sat across from her. The silence hung heavy but not uncomfortable. She glanced around again, scanning the ceilings, the walls, the fireplace. "It looks bigger now," she whispered, quieter. "You remember living here?" She nodded slowly. "I was maybe 5. We left fast. I remember packing in the dark. My mum cried. A lot." Garrett looked at her, heart slowly catching up to the weight of her presence. "I bought this place 4 years ago," he said. "Bank-owned foreclosure." Sadie gave a tiny nod. "Yeah, that sounds right." He didn't press her. He didn't need to. Dot something about the way she sat, small, shivering, but holding her ground made it clear she wasn't here for pity. She was here for memory, for a moment that once belonged to her. "I'm sorry if I scared you," she said after a while. "I just wanted to see it one more time." Garrett shook his head. "You didn't scare me." But that wasn't true. Something about her did scare him. Not because she was a threat, because she felt like a message, a reminder, a mirror. What Garrett didn't know, not yet, was that this girl wasn't a stranger to his story, and Sadie didn't come here by accident. She came because something buried inside her still remembered what this house meant, and what it took from them. Garrett didn't know what to do with her. She sat there, small and quiet, legs dangling off the edge of the leather couch, her wet shoes leaving marks on the rug that cost more than she probably knew. But she wasn't looking at him. She was staring into the fire, watching it like it might tell her something she'd forgotten. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You warm enough?" She nodded, still not looking. "You want something to drink? Cocoa tea?" "No thank you." "You sure?" "My mom says not to accept food from strangers." He smiled a little. "Smart mom." "She's really smart," Sadie said, her voice soft but proud. "She reads a lot. She knows how to fix things. She fixed our heater with a spoon and a paperclip once." Garrett raised his eyebrows. "Seriously?" Sadie nodded. There was silence again, but it wasn't awkward, just careful. He watched her unwrap one arm from the blanket and pull out a drawing from her grocery bag. She unfolded it slowly, a crayon sketch of a house with a big window and a little girl waving from the top. "That was my room," she said, "right above where you found me." Garrett looked at the drawing. It was crude but clear. There were flowers under the windows, a swing set on the left, and 2 stick figures standing by the door. A tall one and a short one. Your mom and you. Sadie nodded. She used to sing to me when we cleaned the floors. Said we were queens of the castle. Garrett swallowed hard. Where's your dad? He asked gently. She blinked, then folded the drawing back up and put it away. He left. I'm sorry. It's okay. He never really liked castles. She smiled when she said it, but it was one of those smiles you learn too young, the kind you wear to make other people feel better. Garrett stood and walked into the kitchen. He needed a minute. He poured himself water. Not whiskey. Water. He looked at his reflection in the fridge door. What was he doing? Bringing in a stranger's kid in the middle of a snowstorm. Talking about her life like it had anything to do with his. But something about her felt familiar when he came back. She was flipping through one of her notebooks. She looked up as he sat back down. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why do you live alone in a house this big? Garrett hesitated. I didn't always. She waited. My wife passed away a year ago. Sadie's face fell. Oh, I'm sorry. He nodded. I still talk to her sometimes. In my head. Sadie looked down at her puppet. I talk to my old stuffed animals like that, especially when Mom's late. Garrett smiled. What's his name? She held it up. A one-eyed dog with floppy ears. Limu, Limu, like limousine, because he's fancy on the outside, but broken inside. Garrett laughed, surprised. It caught him off guard, not just her answer, but the fact that he laughed at all, before he could say anything else. A sharp knocking echoed from the front door. Sadie's whole body tensed. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Garrett stood and walked toward the door. He could already see the figure through the frosted glass. A woman, short, soaked, jaw clenched. He opened it before she could knock again. Are you Garrett Langston? She asked. I am. I'm Julia Martinez. Is my daughter here? Before he could answer, Sadie's voice rang out behind him. Mom, wait. Julia stepped inside, grabbing Sadie's hand. What were you thinking? You walked in the storm. I'm sorry, you don't just disappear. Do you know how scared I was? Garrett stepped back, giving them space. Sadie's eyes welled up. Julia turned to him. I'm sorry she bothered you. We'll leave. She didn't bother me, Garrett said. I don't want charity, Julia snapped. We're not one of your donation cases. This isn't about charity, he said. She just looked cold. Julia softened, just a flicker, then turned to her daughter. We talked about this. No going back. No asking questions. No knocking on doors that don't belong to us. Sadie looked down. I just wanted to see it again. Julia's voice cracked. I know, baby. But it's not ours anymore. There was a silence that none of them knew how to fill. I can drive you home, Garrett offered. Julia hesitated, looked up at him. She saw the grief in his eyes. She recognized it. She'd seen it in her own mirror. Okay, she said finally. Thank you. Sadie looked up. Can I say goodbye to the fireplace? Julia sighed. Go ahead. Sadie walked over, stood in front of the flames, and whispered something to her puppet. Then she turned and followed her mother out. Garrett watched them step into the snow, side by side. And he stood in his doorway, still holding something he didn't know how to name, because for the first time in months, his house didn't feel empty. It felt like something had just opened, and maybe, just maybe, someone had walked in who was supposed to. The front door clicked shut. Garrett stood there a long time, one hand still on the handle, staring at the snow where they had just walked away. He didn't know why he felt it, the ache in his chest. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't pity. It was something older, deeper, like a door creaked open inside him that had been locked for years, not since Rachel. Maybe not even then. He walked back to the fireplace. The blanket Sadie had used was folded neatly on the couch. Her little footprints were still wet on the floor. A smear of snow from her bag marked the edge of the rug. He sat down where she had been sitting, looked into the fire, and thought about what she'd said. We were queens of the castle. It was something a child doesn't make up. It was a memory, real, vivid, specific. And the name. Sadie Martinez. He said it out loud now, slowly, and then it hit him, not like a thunderclap, but like a photo falling out of an old drawer. A memory from years ago, barely intact. Julia. He had met her once, or maybe twice. She'd been hired through a cleaning agency, one of the early companies he'd worked with before the startup took off. Quiet, polite. She had braided hair and eyes that always looked like she was figuring something out. He remembered her because one day, she'd fixed a broken vacuum in under 2 minutes, using nothing but a pen and a shoelace. He'd made a joke at the time, something dumb, like you should be in R&D, and she had laughed, but there was something guarded about her. And now he realized, this wasn't some random girl showing up in a snowstorm. This was someone whose life had once, briefly, touched his, and he hadn't even noticed. Garrett stood and walked into his office. He pulled a storage box from the cabinet and opened it. On the desk, old tax records, property files, maintenance logs. He sifted through them, not sure what he was even looking for. Then he found it, the purchase record for the house. It had been a foreclosure, bought from the bank, but there was a copy of the original resident's name stapled to the back. Julia Martinez. His chest tightened. She hadn't just worked for a company he hired. This had been her home, her daughter's room, their kitchen, their swing set, their castle, and he'd never known. He bought it like it was just another square on the chessboard, empty, silent. He sat back, suddenly cold. That night, Garrett couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sadie on the porch, wet, cold, too brave for her age, holding a puppet with one eye and saying, I just wanted to see it again. He stared at the ceiling for hours, and when the clock hit 4:17 a.m., he finally swung his legs out of bed and stood. The snow outside had stopped. The world was quiet in a way only winter can be. Garrett walked downstairs, turned on one small light, and pulled out his phone. He searched for Julia Martinez, using the name and neighborhood. A few listings came up. One of them was a business, Martinez and Daughter Cleaning, with a Gmail address attached. He clicked compose. But then he paused. What would he even say? Sorry, I bought your house and didn't know it mattered. Your daughter made me feel something again. I think I owe you more than a ride home. He closed the laptop instead. The next morning, Garrett found himself driving. Didn't know where he was going until he passed the street. Sadie had said she walked from a long stretch of low-income apartments built in the 80s. Some of the windows were boarded. Others had decorations from Christmas still hanging, even though the holiday had passed. He parked across the street and sat in the car for a long time. He wasn't stalking them. He wasn't even sure he'd get out, but something in him just needed to see it. And then, by accident or fate, he saw them. Julia, carrying a basket of folded laundry, and Sadie, skipping beside her, wearing a coat still a size too small and that same bag slung over her shoulder. Garrett watched as they disappeared into one of the buildings. He didn't get out. He just sat there, quiet, thinking. That night, as Garrett stood in the kitchen reheating leftovers he wasn't even hungry for, he noticed something stuck to the window above the sink, a drawing. He opened the window. The tape was weak from the cold, but the paper held. It was a child's drawing, in purple crayon. A castle, a swing set, a man standing in a doorway, and a girl, smiling from a window. At the bottom, in shaky block letters, thank you for the fireplace. Sadie Garrett didn't know how it had gotten there. Maybe she left it before she left. Maybe Julia did. Maybe it didn't matter. He held it for a long time, and for the first time in a year, he smiled with his whole face. The drawing was still on his kitchen counter the next morning. Garrett hadn't moved it, just kept looking at it, like if he stared long enough, the truth behind it would crawl out and explain itself. Thank you for the fireplace, said Hi. There was something about the way she wrote it, not just the crayon block letters, but the fact that she left it, as if she knew he'd need it, as if she knew he'd be alone in this kitchen the next day, with nothing but silence and a microwave dinner. And maybe she was right. He walked into his office, opened his laptop again, and this time, didn't hesitate. He typed, greater than subject, from Garrett, greater than, hi Julia, greater than, I just wanted to say thank you, greater than for coming by last night, for letting me drive you home, greater than, Sadie is extraordinary. I found her note on the window, greater than you don't owe me anything, but if either of you ever need something, anything, this door is open. Greater than I'm not always good with people, but I'd like to try. Greater than Garrett. He read it once, no fluff, no pity, just what he felt. Then he hit send. 3 days passed, no reply, which he expected. He spent those days working, or trying to. Meetings, emails, a board call he barely paid attention to. But every time he sat still for more than a minute, his thoughts wandered back to that little girl on his porch, to her bag of drawings, to her shoes. To her mother's face when she said, I don't want charity. Garrett respected that. He'd been poor once too. Not like them. Not hungry poor, but scared poor. The kind where you can't breathe because you don't know if you're about to lose everything. Maybe that's why he couldn't shake it. On the fourth morning, just after 9 a.m., his phone buzzed. Julia Maharti and Easy stared at the screen for a second before answering. Hello. Hi, it's Julia. Hi. There was a pause. Sorry it took me a few days, she said. I didn't know if I should reply. I still don't know. Really, I understand. You didn't have to write. I know. I wanted to. Another pause. Longer this time. I have a job downtown tomorrow, she said finally. An office cleaning, near Langston Tower. Oh, he said. That's actually mine. I figured. He waited. Sadie asked if she could come with me. She usually doesn't, but she's been asking a lot about you. Not in a weird way. She just liked the fireplace. I liked having her here. I know. There was a silence neither of them knew how to end. I'm not asking for anything, Julia said. I'm not offering anything, Garrett replied. Just time. That seemed to settle something. Okay, she said. We'll be there around 4. If you want to. I don't know. Say hi. I'd like that. And just like that, the call ended. But something had changed. At 4:05 p.m. the next day, Garrett stood in the lobby of Langston Tower, adjusting his cuffs like it mattered. Sadie spotted him first. She ran, not fast, not loud, just like someone who was happy but didn't know how to show it yet. She stopped just in front of him, her bag bouncing against her side. You really work here? Garrett smiled. Unfortunately, yes. This place is huge. I try not to get lost. Sadie looked around. Does it have a fireplace? Garrett laughed. Not a real one. Just one of those digital ones on a screen. Lame, she grinned. Julia walked in a moment later, clipboard in hand, eyes already scanning the corners of the lobby for dust. I don't want to keep you, she said, not making eye contact. You're not. Sadie tugged Garrett's sleeve. Can I show you something? He looked at Julia, who hesitated, then nodded. Upstairs, in a corner of his office, Garrett rarely used, Sadie spread out her drawings, pages and pages of them. A castle, a family, a broken swing. A man who looked oddly like Garrett standing next to a girl with wild crayon hair and a dog with one eye. This is Limo, she said, pointing proudly. Garrett knelt beside her. You're really good. I want to be an artist, or a storyteller, or a vet, depends on the day, he smiled. Why did you draw this one? He held up a picture of the fireplace with Julia sleeping on the couch, and Sadie curled at her side. Because it was quiet, she said, and warm. And Mum wasn't sad for a whole hour. He swallowed hard. Sadie looked up. Do you ever get sad, Mr. Garrett? All the time. Do you tell people? No, he said. Not usually. I think you should, she said. It helps. That night, Garrett walked through his house with different eyes. Every room felt slightly less empty. He didn't know what was happening. He didn't know if this was just a one-time visit or the start of something bigger. But he knew this. He didn't want to forget the way that little girl looked at the world, and he didn't want her to disappear into the snow again, not without knowing he saw her this time, really saw her. Garrett hadn't planned to see them again so soon. After Sadie's visit to his office, he expected silence, time, distance, maybe even goodbye. But 2 days later, there was a knock at the gate, and this time, it wasn't a snowstorm. It was sunlight, cold, late winter sunlight, the kind that feels like hope, even if it still stings your skin. He checked the camera. Julia and Sadie, holding a thermos and wearing a backpack with stickers peeling off the sides. He opened the gate remotely, heart already racing for reasons he didn't want to name. By the time they reached the front door, he was there pretending he'd just been passing through. Sadie beamed. We brought you soup. Soup Mom made too much. She does that when she's stressed. Julia gave her daughter a sideways look. Thank you, Sadie. Garrett smiled. I like stress soup. They stepped inside. The kitchen felt warmer with them in it, more lived in. Julia moved quietly, setting the thermos on the counter like she'd done it 100 times before. Sadie wandered to the living room, pulling a book out of her backpack. You don't have to stay, Garrett told Julia. I know. You could have just dropped it off. She nodded, but I didn't. He leaned back against the island. Why today? She looked at him then. Really looked. Because Sadie asked me last night if you were lonely, she said. And I didn't know how to answer. Garrett didn't speak. I don't want her getting attached to someone who's going to disappear, Julia said quietly. She's been through enough of that. I'm not planning to disappear. That's what people say, and then they do. There was a sharpness to her voice, but not anger, fear, the kind that comes from surviving, the kind that keeps your bags packed even when you've unpacked them. Julia, he said slowly, did we meet before, years ago? She hesitated. I think so, she said. You wouldn't remember. Was it through your work? She nodded. Briefly. You were just starting Langston Tech. I cleaned for one of your partners. That's how you ended up living here. No, she said. Then after a pause, yes, eventually. He waited. She didn't elaborate. Instead, she pulled 2 mugs from the cupboard, without asking, and poured soup into both. She remembered where the spoons were. He noticed that. Sadie remembers a lot, Garrett said. She does. She said her room was the one above the window seat, the same one that used to be my home office. Julia nodded. She used to draw on the closet. Walls, butterflies. I never had the heart to scrub them off. Garrett blinked. They're still there. Julia looked up. Really? I never repainted. I rarely go in there. She smiled barely, then turned serious again. I don't want you to get the wrong idea, she said. This wasn't about finding you. She didn't even know who you were. We didn't come looking. I believe you. Julia leaned against the counter, her arms crossed now. She thinks you're a character in a story, she said. The man in the mansion who lights fires and listens. Garrett chuckled. I'm not that poetic. She is, Julia said. Too much, sometimes. They both glanced toward the living room. Sadie was curled in the corner chair, her puppet, on her lap, reading aloud quietly. She brings her dad up sometimes, Garrett said gently. Julia's face hardened. She still remembers him. She does. Garrett hesitated, then asked, Can I ask what happened? Julia was silent. Then, he left before she turned 4. Just didn't come home one night. Any idea where he is? She shook her head. I stopped looking a long time ago. There was something final in her voice, but also something else, a layer beneath it. Not a lie exactly, but a story edited for safety. Later that evening, after they left, Garrett stood at the closet in his old home office. He opened the door. There they were, faint, cracked, but still there, butterflies in bright childish colors, some flying, some perched, one with a lopsided crown. He ran his hand gently over the wall, and something, a thought, flickered in his mind. He walked back to his desk, opened his safe, and pulled out an old photo album Rachel had made before she passed. It wasn't full of family photos, not of their own family. It had been a collection of faces from the early days of the company. Launch parties, fundraisers, outreach programs. And on page 6, a photo, a company holiday party, Garrett, wearing an awkward red scarf. Rachel, beside him, laughing. And just off to the side, blurry but unmistakable, Julia, holding a tray, hair braided back, and beside her a stroller. The tag on the stroller was handwritten, SMERTINES. Garrett stared at it. The date on the back said, December 12, 2014. Sadie would have been what? Not even 2. He closed the album slowly. This wasn't just memory. This was connection. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he was starting to understand this. Wasn't about kindness anymore. It was about responsibility, and something Julia wasn't telling him. Garrett stared at the photograph again the next morning, this time under full light. There she was, Julia. In the background, half turned, blurry, but it was her, no doubt. Her braid, her posture, the sharp way she held herself, even when she was just carrying a tray of drinks. And next to her, the stroller with that handwritten tag, S. Martinez. He did the math. Again, 2014, 2 years before he bought the mansion. 1 year after Langston Tech got its first big investment. Back when they hosted those ridiculous holiday parties just to look like they had it together. He remembered Rachel inviting the cleaning staff to take leftover wine home. Remembered someone bringing their baby to the break room. A few people grumbled, but he hadn't noticed much beyond his own ambition back then. And now, almost a decade later, here was this girl sitting in his living room, drawing castles on old walls, asking him if he ever got lonely. He had to ask. That afternoon he called Julia. She didn't answer. He tried again the next morning, voicemail, so he didn't call a third time. He waited. And when waiting didn't work, he went for a walk that somehow led past the low-income complex. He swore he wasn't checking on. He told himself it was coincidence, until he saw them again. Julia, stepping out of the laundry room, basket balanced on her hip, Sadie just behind her, spinning slowly in her worn sneakers, arms out like airplane wings. He almost turned away, but Sadie spotted him. "Mr. Garrett," she shouted, waving. Julia turned, stiffened. He raised a hand. "I wasn't following, I swear." Julia sighed. "Sadie, can you go back inside and start the dryer, baby?" Sadie blinked. "It's all ready, go on." She gave Garrett a smile. "We made cookies yesterday. Mom didn't burn them." "Wow," he said, smiling back. "A miracle." She disappeared inside. Julia lowered her basket and looked at him. "You shouldn't be here." "I know. You didn't text. I figured I should ask in person." "For what?" Garrett pulled the folded photo from his coat pocket. Dot held it out to her. She didn't take it, just looked down at it. Her face changed, barely, but enough. "I found this," he said quietly. "Holiday party, 2014. She nodded. "I didn't know you were there." "You wouldn't have that, Sadie." She paused, then nodded again. "I remember that party," she said. "Your wife gave me her scarf, said it was too warm inside. I think she just didn't want me to freeze when I left." Garrett's throat tightened. "I remember her doing that. She was kind," Julia said, "and tired. You both looked tired." He tucked the photo back into his pocket. "Why didn't you tell me you were there?" "Because it wasn't important." "It is now." Julia looked down at her shoes. The soles were starting to wear thin. "I didn't want anything from you," she said. "I'm not offering anything." "Then why are you here?" Garrett hesitated. "Because there's something I need to know." Julia looked at him. And for the first time, her armor cracked just enough to show the woman underneath. "I didn't lie to you," she said. "I didn't say you did, but I didn't tell you everything either." She shifted the laundry basket to her other hip. "Can we talk somewhere else?" she asked. "Somewhere Sadie won't overhear." They sat in a small park 2 blocks away, empty swings, one wooden bench, a quietness between them that wasn't unfriendly, just careful. "She's not your daughter," Garrett said gently. "Is she?" Julia turned her head, but she didn't deny it. "I mean biologically," he added. "I know what you meant." He waited. "She's mine," Julia said, "in every way that matters." "That's not what I'm asking." "I know." There was a long pause. Then she looked straight at him. "She's not biologically yours either," she said. "But she could be." Garrett blinked. "What?" Julia's voice didn't shake. "I never said who her father was, because I didn't know if I should." He stared at her. She went on. "I was young. I needed a job. I worked nights, cleaned mornings, took care of Sadie in between. It was hard, messy, and during one of those months, I worked for your partner, Rick." Garrett nodded slowly. "He was a nightmare." "Yes, he was. But he wasn't the one I met that night at the holiday party." She looked away. "You were kind," she said, "and drunk, and kind again." Garrett opened his mouth, then closed it. Julia kept talking. "I'm not saying this to make you panic, or to ask for money, or to throw your life off course, but I've done the math more than once. I've looked at her face. I've heard the way she talks, the way she thinks, and I've always wondered." Garrett leaned forward, elbows on knees, heart racing. "Are you saying Sadie could be my daughter?" "I'm saying there's a chance." That night, Garrett didn't sleep, not a wink. He sat in the dark, next to the fireplace Sadie had thanked him for. He held the drawing again, and for the first time since she arrived at his door, he looked at her picture and saw not just a child he felt something for, but a child he might have made. Garrett didn't leave the house the next day. He cancelled 2 meetings, let his phone buzz unanswered, ignored a dinner invitation from a board member, whose name he didn't care to remember. He just sat. Sometimes at the fireplace, sometimes at the window, once at the top of the stairs, staring at the door to the room Sadie said used to be hers. "There's a chance she's yours." The words echoed like a bell in a cathedral, not loud, but impossible to ignore. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even scared. He was unsteady. It was like someone had reached back into his past and pulled forward a piece he didn't even know he was missing. What if it was true? What if that little girl, the one with the puppet and the quiet courage, was his daughter? What did that make him? That evening, he sat on the floor of the living room with an old leather journal Rachel had given him when they first got married. Inside were scraps, notes, sketches, things he didn't have the guts to say out loud. One of the first pages held a list he'd written at age 30, the week before his startup launched. Greater than asterisk things I want, but don't deserve. Asterisk greater than a company that outlives me, greater than a home with laughter, a child who sees me and isn't afraid. He stared at the last one, the longest dot, and thought about Sadie. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't impressed either. Not by the mansion, not by the car, not by the fancy coffee machine that intimidated half his staff. She saw him as a person, and that scared him more than anything. The next day, Julia called. "Hey," she said quietly. "I know that was a lot." Garrett nodded, then realized she couldn't see him. "Yeah, I'm not saying we need to figure everything out right now. I know, she's not asking questions. She doesn't suspect anything. I haven't said a word." "Okay." Another pause. "I have a job near your house tomorrow. If she comes with me, would it be okay if she visited?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes, of course." Julia was quiet a beat longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said. "I mean that." The next day, Sadie came alone. Julia dropped her off at the gate and said she'd be back in a couple of hours. "I brought books," Sadie said as Garrett opened the door, "and limo, and snacks. But Mum made me promise not to get crumbs on the couch." "She trusts you more than I do," Garrett joked. Sadie grinned and stepped inside. The visit wasn't dramatic. It wasn't full of secrets or heavy tension. It was quiet, easy, almost normal. She read in the sunroom. Garrett made tea. They talked about dogs. She asked if he ever had one. "Not since I was a kid," he said. "A golden retriever named Max. What happened to him?" "He ran away." Sadie blinked. "That's sad." "Yeah," Garrett said. It was. Sadie reached for her bag. "I made you something." She handed him a folded piece of paper. Inside was a pencil sketch of the fireplace. Again, but this time with two figures sitting in front of it. One tall, one short. Limo curled between them. "That's us," she said. "And that's Limo. And that's Coco." Garrett swallowed hard. "You remembered the mugs. You used the blue one. I used the one with the chip." Garrett smiled. "You've got a good eye." She looked up at him. "Are you sad today?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "A little," he said finally. "But also something else." "What?" He paused, then said it softly. "Hopeful." Sadie seemed to like that answer. Later, Julia returned. She didn't come inside, just waited by the car. Garrett walked Sadie out, her backpack swinging on one arm, her drawing carefully tucked into his coat pocket. "Did she behave?" Julia asked. "She's perfect." "I know." Sadie buckled herself in, and Garrett leaned on the doorframe for a second. "Julia," he said, "if I wanted to confirm things, would you be open to that?" She didn't ask what he meant. "Yes," she said, "if you're ready." "I don't know if I am." "That's okay," she replied. "Just don't wait too long." She looked at him then, the kind of look people give when they've carried something for years. "Alone, she's always wondered why she draws people with your eyes," Julia said, "even though she's never seen a photo of you before now." Then she got in the car and drove away. That night, Garrett opened the drawing again. The fireplace. The Coco. The quiet moment he hadn't even known meant anything until she put it on paper, and he realized something. Even if it turned out she wasn't his, she already was. Garrett didn't rush. He could have. He could have picked up the phone, ordered a test, set it all in motion like it was just another business transaction. That's what the old Garrett would have done. Fast, clean, logical. But this wasn't logic. This was heart, and hearts don't work on schedules. So he sat with it, walked with it, lived with it. He didn't tell anyone. Not his board, not his assistant, not even the friend who used to be like a brother to him before things went silent between them. The only person he told was himself. He stood in the mirror that week, 3 separate times, looked into his own tired eyes, and said out loud, "I might be a father." Every time, it hit a little deeper. 3 days later, he texted Julia, "Would you and Sadie be free this Saturday afternoon? I'd like to make you dinner, nothing fancy. Just here." "Greater than G," she replied 15 minutes later. "We'll be there." Jay Heath didn't read into it. He didn't need poetry. He needed presence. And that reply meant she was willing to walk back in. Garrett cleaned the kitchen himself. He didn't hire anyone. He picked out ingredients Julia might like. Simple, healthy, nothing too rich. A little homemade soup, roast chicken, mashed sweet potatoes the way Rachel used to make them on cold days. When they arrived, Sadie was carrying a bouquet of paper flowers. "We made them," she said proudly. "No real flowers because Mom says they die too fast." He took them with both hands. They're perfect. Julia stepped inside slowly. She wasn't dressed up, just clean jeans, soft sweater, her braid pulled back the way she always wore it when she wasn't trying to impress anyone, which made her look more beautiful than she probably realized. Dinner was easy, light laughter, stories about school. Sadie's puppet Limo got placed in the seat next to her with his own napkin. When Julia offered to help clean up, Garrett waved her off. "I invited you," he said. "You're the guest." She watched him from the counter, quietly. "You're different," she said finally. Garrett paused. Then the man I met years ago." He nodded. "I'm trying." "You don't have to try for us." "I'm not," he said. "I'm doing it for me." Julia looked down, then glanced toward the living room where Sadie was drawing. "You said you wanted to talk." "I do. Should she hear it?" He hesitated. "Not yet." Julia nodded once, then followed him onto the back porch. The cold air hit them gently, not biting like before, just sharp enough to make you feel awake. He handed her an envelope. She didn't take it. "What is it?" she asked. "I made a choice. Okay, no lawyers, no drama, just, this is for her." He opened it for her. Inside, a document, and a sealed letter. The document was a trust, modest, not extravagant, but enough to secure Sadie's education, healthcare, and opportunities through early adulthood. The letter was handwritten. "She doesn't have to read it now," he said, "or ever. But it's everything I'd say if I could explain this right." Julia's eyes shimmered. "I didn't do a test," he added. "I realized. It doesn't matter. You're sure?" He looked at her. "I know who I was back then, and I know who I am now. And if I waited for proof, I'd be hiding behind it. She's already in my life. I want her to stay." Julia said nothing for a long time. Then finally, softly, "I've never let anyone help us." "I'm not helping you," Garrett said gently. "I'm showing up." "That's different." Julia exhaled, the kind of breath you hold for years and don't realize until it leaves you. "I don't know how to trust this," she whispered. "You don't have to. Not yet." He looked back toward the glass door, where Sadie was holding up her new drawing to show Limo. "She already does." When they left that night, Sadie hugged him tighter than usual. She slipped a folded note into his hand without saying anything. He didn't open it until after the door closed. In her handwriting, with small stars around the edges, greater than "Thank you for letting me belong here." Garrett sat down at the fireplace with the note in his lap. No test, no blood. But somehow, she already knew, and maybe deep down so did he. It snowed again that week. Not a blizzard, just the quiet kind. The kind that makes everything still. It dusted the trees, softened the sidewalks, and blanketed the old swing set in the backyard of Garrett Langston's house. He watched it fall from the upstairs window, the same room Sadie once called her own. The drawings were still on the closet walls. He hadn't touched them, would not now. He thought about how strange life was, how people talk about second chances like they arrive wrapped in certainty. But this one hadn't. This one had come in soaked socks and brave eyes, and a puppet. Named Limo that Saturday. Julia and Sadie came again. There was no invitation, not this time, just a knock at the door, and then the sound of Sadie humming as she came inside, like she'd always belonged. Julia followed her in slowly, holding something in her arms. Garrett raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "A fireplace screen," Julia said, setting it down gently. "I found it in storage. It used to sit in front of the one in our living room. Before, you know." Garrett knelt beside it, brushing off the fabric cover. It was old, but beautiful. Wrought iron vines and leaves, handmade. "I thought maybe it belonged here again," she added. He smiled. "It does," Sadie called from the living room. "Can we make cocoa?" Garrett looked to Julia. She nodded. They drank cocoa on the rug, next to the fire. Limo got his own tiny cup, filled with exactly one marshmallow and nothing else. Garrett asked Sadie about her week, her school, her new art project. At one point, she leaned over and whispered, "Want to see something secret?" He nodded solemnly. She pulled a folded paper from her bag and handed it to him. It was a new drawing. 3 people, a tall man with graying hair, a woman with a braid, a girl holding their hands, smiling so wide her crayon cheeks touched her eyes. Above them, in big, messy letters, "Our home." Garrett didn't say anything he couldn't. Later, as Julia helped Sadie into her coat, she looked back at Garrett. "She's sleeping better," she said, "since coming here, since he..." Garrett glanced toward the drawing on the counter. "So am I." Julia nodded, then hesitated. There's something I've been meaning to tell you. He turned. She looked down, then back up, and this time, she didn't blink. She started calling you something. At home, just between us. I didn't correct her. What is it? She smiled softly. Mr. G. Garrett felt something warm rise in his chest. I like that, he said. Sounds like a superhero. She thinks you are one, Julia said, because you have a fire button. He laughed. She's not wrong. As they walked toward the door, Garrett stopped them. One more thing. He reached into the cabinet above the fireplace and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He handed it to Julia. She unwrapped it slowly. A key dot to the house. I'm not asking anything from you, he said. No promises. No pressure. Just, if you ever need warmth, if you ever need to feel like the world hasn't shut the door. He nodded toward Sadie. This place is hers, and it's yours too. Julia didn't speak, not with words, but her hand closed gently over his, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. That night, after the house was quiet again, Garrett stood in the room upstairs. He looked at the walls, the butterflies, the sun, the castles. He picked up a pencil dot, and for the first time in decades, he added something of his own, a small figure. A man with a crayon tie and bad hair, standing in the corner of the castle, smiling. Outside, the snow kept falling, but for the first time in a long time, the house felt full.